Imagine a world veiled in shadow. Darkness is not merely the absence of light, but a sentient force. In this place, whispers slither through the air like vipers, brushing against your ears with secrets you wish you could unhear. Here, the stars do not merely twinkle. They pulse, as if keeping rhythm with some ancient and terrible heart. The world itself seems alive, its every corner imbued with an eerie intelligence, watching, waiting. You are a scholar, an archivist who spends their days among dusty tomes and fragile scrolls. You revel in the pursuit of knowledge, and though your peers mock you for your fascination with the forbidden, you wear their disdain like a badge of honor. Tonight, a letter arrived at your study, a call to uncover truths buried beneath centuries of silence. It bore no sender, only the sigil of an ancient order long thought dissolved. The parchment smelled of old ink and decay, and the moment you touched it, a chill crept up your spine. The journey begins with unease. A guide leads you to a jagged canyon, where the earth opens like a wound. "This is as far as I go," they mutter, their face pale and eyes wide. The wind carries with it a low, keening wail, almost too soft to be real. You take your lantern and descend into the chasm alone. The air grows colder with each step, the oppressive weight of the unknown thickening with each passing moment. Your heart beats with a mix of trepidation and thrill, a stark reminder that you are stepping into a realm few dare to tread. At the bottom, an ancient doorway looms, carved from a single slab of black stone, its surface inscribed with runes that seem to shift when you aren't looking directly at them. As you push it open, a sensation washes over you. Not dread, not awe, but something nameless, something that gnaws at the edges of your mind. It feels as though the very act of entering this place is rewriting your existence, tying you to something vast and incomprehensible. Inside, the library defies reason. Shelves stretch endlessly, arranged in impossible geometries. Books float, spin, and rearrange themselves, their pages whispering to one another in languages long since dead. The light of your lantern seems absorbed by the space, swallowed whole and leaving only a dim halo around you. The ceiling is unseen, lost in an expanse of inky blackness. This is not a place built by human hands. It is a relic of something far older, far greater. The air is thick with the scent of ancient paper and something metallic, like blood. And then you see it, the codex. It rests on a pedestal made of bone, its cover pulsating like living flesh. As you approach, the whispers in the air into a cacophony, each voice distinct and urgent. You extend a trembling hand, and the moment your fingers graze the surface, the world changes. The library dissolves. You are nowhere and everywhere at once. Stars explode and reform around you. You witness the birth of universes and the death of gods. Time folds in on itself, and you realize that the whispers you heard were not external. They were your own thoughts, laid bare and amplified to deafening extremes. And at the center of it all is a figure. It's impossible to describe, for its form is in constant flux. A silhouette one moment, a beast the next, and sometimes nothing at all. "You have come far," it says, its voice a blend of countless others. "Few make it this far. Fewer still leave." "Who are you?" you ask, your voice a fragile whisper. "I am the harbinger of the void," it replies. "I am the thought that lingers before despair, the silence between breaths, the end of all things." You try to look away, but find you cannot. This gaze, though eyeless, pins you in place. You sought knowledge, it continues, and you have found it, but knowledge always comes at a price. In that moment, your mind fractures. Memories not your own flood into you. Lives lived and lost, tragedies and triumphs, the rise and fall of empires, the scream of a child whose name you cannot remember. You drop to your knees, clutching your head, but it is futile. The harbinger steps closer. "Do you see now?" it asks. "Knowledge is not a gift. It is a burden, and now you will carry it." You blink and find yourself back in your study, the codex gone. But something is wrong. The room feels smaller, suffocating. The air is heavy, and the shadows seem to writhe at the corners of your vision. You look at your reflection in the window pane and do not recognize the face staring back at you. From that day onward, you are not the same. The world is not the same. You see things others cannot, fractures in reality, glimpses of the void. People avoid you, their eyes filled with unease, as though they can sense the weight of what you now carry. The knowledge that cannot be unseen, cannot be unknown. And at night, as you lie in bed, you hear it again, the harbinger's voice, faint but undeniable. You sought the abyss and the abyss found you. Tell me, scholar, was it worth it? Your answer, if you have one, is lost in the unending silence that follows. The weeks that follow unravel you further. Your dreams, once a sanctuary of quiet reflection, have become a battleground of nightmares. In these dreams, you are not merely pursued by monsters. You become one. Your hands twist into claws, your face shifts, becoming alien. Each morning you awaken drenched in sweat, unsure if you are truly awake or if reality itself has become another layer of the dream. One evening, as you sit surrounded by the crumbling remains of your study, the ground trembles. A fissure snakes its way through the wooden floorboards, revealing a pale, ghastly light emanating from below. The codex is there, its fleshy cover pulsating, alive and waiting. Against your better judgment, you descend once more. The light blinds you at first, but when your eyes adjust, you find yourself in a cavernous void. The walls are lined with massive faces carved in stone, their eyes hollow yet somehow watching. You cannot escape me, the harbinger intones, its voice now a tempest within your skull. You are my chosen vessel. The truths you hold are not for you alone. They must be shared. You try to resist, but the pull is inexorable. The codex opens of its own accord, its pages flipping wildly. Words bleed from the parchment, coalescing into shapes, symbols, and then entire worlds. You see the rise of civilizations built on the bones of the forgotten, the endless cycle of creation and destruction, and the inevitable return of the void to claim it all. The harbinger steps forth, now more tangible than before. Its form is still ever-changing, a storm of faces, limbs, and shadows. Speak, it commands, and the words pour forth from your lips unbidden. Prophecies, curses, the names of ancient deities long erased from human memory. The cavern echoes with your voice, magnified 1,000-fold. When the torrent of words finally ceases, you collapse. The codex closes with a resounding thud, and the harbinger looms over you. You have done well, it says, but your task is far from complete. The world must hear the truth. Back in your study, you find that time has passed differently. Years, perhaps decades, have slipped away, and the world outside is unrecognizable. Ruins stretch where cities once stood, and the sky is a constant swirl of ash and ember. You wander these desolate lands, the codex now bound to your very being. People shun you, some attacking in blind desperation, but none can harm you. The void protects its own. Through it all, the harbinger's voice remains. It guides you, taunts you, and at times, even consoles you. You become a figure of legend, a specter whispered of in frightened tones. Some seek you out, hoping to glean forbidden knowledge, but none leave unchanged. Most simply vanish. The end comes not with a roar, but with a whisper. The void's tendrils creep ever closer, devouring the remnants of existence. You stand at the precipice, the codex in hand, and face the harbinger one final time. Are you ready? It asks. You nod. For all your fear, all your regret, there is a strange peace in surrender. The codex opens and the void claims all. This was the fate of the scholar who dared seek the abyss. A cautionary tale, or perhaps an invitation. For even as the void consumes, the whispers begin anew, calling to another. The codex is eternal, a shadow lingering in the annals of history and myth. From the ashes of one existence, it spawns another, a cycle unbroken. And as each iteration of the tale unfolds, the void grows hungrier. It whispers to dreamers, to seekers, to fools. It beckons, promising truth and enlightenment. But truth, as the scholar learned, is a labyrinth without an exit, a burden too heavy for any mortal to bear. Will you answer its call? The codex awaits, and the harbinger watches. The harbinger's voice grows fainter as you vanish into the void. Yet the echoes remain eternal, intertwining with the fabric of all existence. Some claim to have seen a shadowed figure in the ruins, wandering with purpose yet aimlessly, its hands clutching an ancient tome. Whispers of its passing drive the strongest minds to madness, and its visage haunts the dreams of kings and paupers alike. And in the endless dark where the harbinger reigns, it continues to weave its symphony of silence and despair. The codex's pages turn endlessly, recording the stories of those who dared and fell, binding them forever in its grip. The void is patient. It knows more will come. And so, the tale of the scholar becomes one of countless voices in an eternal chorus. But perhaps one day one voice will rise above the rest. Not to echo the harbinger's call, but to silence it forever. Until then, the cycle endures, as does the weight of forbidden knowledge. The story ends here, and it begins anew. For the void is eternal, and its appetite insatiable. The wind was silent that night, as if the world itself held its breath. Overhead, the moon hung low, casting an eerie glow upon the blackened forest. This was no ordinary woodland. Each tree seemed to lean inward, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Beneath their shadows, the ground was unnervingly soft, as though something beneath the surface pulsed faintly with life. You tread carefully, your lantern's flickering light a fragile ward against the consuming darkness. This journey was not one you took lightly. The map clutched in your hand promised secrets beyond comprehension, but it also warned of dangers too great to name. Still, you pressed forward, drawn by the pull of a question you could not answer. What lies beyond the boundary of the known? A faint sound broke the silence, a whisper, carried on a breeze too cold for summer. At first, you dismissed it as a trick of the mind. But as you walked deeper into the forest, the whispers grew louder, converging into a symphony of voices. They spoke in a language you did not understand, yet their meaning was clear. Turn back. It was a warning, but it was also a challenge. The air grew heavier with each step, laden with a metallic tang that made your skin crawl. Up ahead, the trees parted to reveal a clearing, and at its center stood a doorway of impossible construction. It was a perfect circle, forged from a material that shimmered with a hue no earthly spectrum could produce. It hung suspended in midair, defying the laws of gravity and reason. You hesitated, your every instinct screaming at you to flee. But the whispers surged again, more insistent now, and your feet carried you forward. As you approached, the doorway seemed to hum, resonating with a frequency that thrummed in your bones. You reached out a trembling hand, and the moment your fingers brushed the surface, the world fell away. Colors you had no names for erupted around you, cascading in waves that bent and broke the fabric of reality. You felt yourself falling, though there was no ground beneath you and no sky above. Time itself seemed to fracture, moments splintering and colliding in a cacophony of sensations. And then, all at once, the chaos stilled. You found yourself standing in a vast, empty expanse. The ground beneath your feet was smooth and glassy, reflecting a starless void that stretched infinitely in all directions. In the distance, a figure stood waiting. It was tall and indistinct, its form shifting like smoke caught in a breeze. As you approached, it spoke, its voice a chorus of echoes. "You seek the answers that none before you have dared to ask," it said. "But answers are not gifts, they are weights, and the truth you seek will anchor you to the abyss." "What is this place?" you asked, your voice barely more than a whisper. "This is the nexus," the figure replied, "the seam between what is and what cannot be. It is where all paths converge, and where all who enter are tested." The figure gestured, and the void around you shifted. Scenes from your life unfolded before you, each one a vivid and painful memory. The choices you regretted, the paths not taken, the moments of weakness you buried deep within yourself. They played out in brutal detail, stripping you bare of all pretense. "Why show me this?" you demanded, your voice rising with desperation. Because the truth is not found in the world around you, the figure said. It is found within. To face the unknown, you must first face yourself. The scenes dissolved, replaced by a single image. A mirror. You saw yourself reflected in it, but the reflection did not mimic your movements. Instead, it stared back at you, its gaze unyielding and cold. Slowly, it stepped forward, crossing the boundary of the mirror and standing before you. This is your final test, the figure intoned. Defeat what you fear most. Your reflection smiled, but it was a smile devoid of warmth. In its hand, a weapon materialized, a blade forged of the same impossible material as the doorway that brought you here. As the figure dissolved into the void, your reflection attacked. The battle was unlike anything you had ever experienced. Each strike was not merely physical but psychological. The blade tore through memories, severing your confidence and exposing your doubts. Every time you faltered, the reflection grew stronger, feeding on your insecurities. But as the fight wore on, something shifted. You began to see through the reflection's facade. This power came not from its strength but from your fear. And so, instead of fighting, you stopped. You dropped your weapon and stood tall, meeting its gaze with defiance. You have no power here, you said, your voice steady. The reflection froze, its form wavering like a mirage. With a final, anguished cry, it dissolved, leaving you alone once more. The figure reappeared, its presence less imposing now, almost respectful. You have passed, it said simply. But the journey is far from over. The nexus began to fade, the glassy ground crumbling into nothingness. You felt yourself being pulled back, the colors and chaos returning in a rush. When you opened your eyes, you were back in the clearing, the doorway gone. But something had changed. The whispers were silent, replaced by a deep, resonant stillness. The map in your hand had vanished, replaced by a single, cryptic symbol etched into your palm. You did not know what it meant, but you knew your journey was only beginning. As the weeks passed, the symbol on your palm began to burn faintly at times, reacting to unseen forces. You found yourself drawn to forgotten places, abandoned temples, crumbling ruins, and caves that whispered of ancient secrets. Each new location brought new challenges, as if the nexus still tested you from afar. In one such ruin, you discovered a pedestal similar to the doorway, though smaller and adorned with intricate carvings. On it rested a shard of crystal, pulsating with the same otherworldly hue as the nexus. When you touched it, visions overwhelmed you once more. This time, they were not of your past but of countless others who had walked this path. Some succeeded, but most failed, their souls consumed by the very truths they sought. You are not the first, a voice whispered, disembodied but familiar, and you will not be the last. The crystal dissolved in your hand, leaving behind a single word etched into your mind. Ascend. The directive haunted you, driving you further into the unknown. You began to notice changes within yourself. Your perception sharpened, allowing you to see threads of energy that connected all things. You could hear the faint echoes of thoughts and feel the weight of unseen presences. The world had opened to you, but it was not a gift, it was a burden. Those around you began to fear you. They whispered of the changes in your demeanor, the distant look in your eyes, and the unnatural stillness that sometimes overtook you. You tried to explain, to share the wonders and terrors of what you had experienced, but your words only deepened their mistrust. Eventually, you chose solitude, retreating to the wilderness where the whispers of the void felt more like companions than threats. One night, as you stared into the embers of a dying fire, the symbol on your palm flared to life. The ground beneath you trembled, and a fissure opened, revealing a staircase spiraling downward. The air was thick with anticipation, and the whispers returned, no longer warning but urging you forward. The descent was arduous, each step feeling heavier than the last. At the bottom, you found yourself in a chamber unlike any you had seen before. The walls were lined with symbols that glowed faintly, illuminating a massive structure at the center. A throne of sorts, forged from the same impossible material as the doorway and the blade. Seated upon it was a figure cloaked in shadow. "You have come far," it said, its voice resonating with a weight that made the air tremble. "But the journey is not yet complete." "Who are you?" you asked, though part of you already knew. "I am the Nexus," it replied, "the will of the void, the keeper of its truths. And now you must decide. Will you take my place, or will you fall like the others?" The weight of its words settled upon you, and the chamber grew silent. You knew this was the final test, not a battle of strength but of resolve. To ascend was to sacrifice, to become something other, to leave behind all that you were. But to refuse was to be consumed, your essence scattered into the void. With trembling hands, you approached the throne. The figure rose, its form dissolving into the air, leaving the seat empty. You hesitated, one last flicker of doubt crossing your mind. But the symbol on your palm burned brighter, and the whispers surged, drowning out all hesitation. As you sat, the void embraced you. The chamber dissolved, replaced by the infinite expanse of the Nexus. You felt yourself unraveling, your thoughts merging with the void, becoming one with its will. And in that moment you understood. The Nexus was not a place or a being. It was a cycle, an eternal loop of seekers and truths, of burdens and ascensions. And now you were its guardian, its guide, its harbinger. Far above, in the forest where your journey began, the doorway shimmered back into existence, waiting for the next seeker to cross its threshold. And somewhere in the infinite expanse, the whispers began anew.